On today's fermentation contemplation,
backsweetening.
So lately, a lot of people have been talking about backsweetening, and there's some misunderstandings about it. There's some ideas that aren't necessarily great, and there's just seems to be a lot of questions about it. So we thought, let's just talk about it. We did a video on 5 ways to backsweeten a couple of years ago. I watched it, and I thought, let's make this a little bit more concise and, you know.
Just in case you want to watch that one as well, I'm going to make sure that that is linked in the comments below.
So the first question is, what is backsweetening? At its simplest, at the core, by the way, we have notes because I will go off on tangents and never get to the point, so I'm reading from notes. At its core, it means adding something to enhance the sweetness of a brew. Notice I didn't say what you're adding or what the brew is, because you can backsweeten beer, wine, cider, mead. You can backsweeten a cocktail. You can backsweeten anything.
A nice cup of tea.
Yeah, that's technically backsweetening. By the way, we have a visitor today. Oh, he just ran away.
I was wondering what that was.
It was Inigo. He's trying to get into the window. Come here, buddy.
Do you need to get in the window?
He's getting too big. Anyway, he's just going to sit over there for a while because he won't make a choice. So, he's trying. He got in. So yeah, even like adding sugar to your coffee is, in the grandest technical sense, backsweetening it, because it was already a finished product and now you're making it sweeter. Is there anything wrong with adding sugar to a cup? No, it's all personal preference, okay? Why do you backsweeten? And do you have to backsweeten? This is something that comes up. I don't know why. Some people seem to think that you have to backsweeten everything.
The reason or the way to figure out if you need to backsweeten a brew or not is to simply take a taste.
If you like it, you don't need to do anything.
There you go.
If you go,
it could be a little
could use
sweeter.
A little sweetness, then you backsweeten. Or adjust your taste buds to like something drier, which is what I'm trying to do. Now, if it's too sweet, that's a whole other issue and not something we're going to cover here. That's a whole other fermentation contemplation video. Anyway, what can you use to backsweeten? Basically anything that makes it sweet, but some of them are sugar, like white sugar, brown sugar, honey, juices, juice concentrates, fruit, mashed fruit, stevia, sucralose, allulose, monk fruit, and lactose. Basically anything that increases the sweetness. Now they all have varying degrees of effectiveness, and they all come with their own, if you do this, you might want to watch out for this. Some of the things to be careful of. Actually, we have ways to backsweeten in here too. We'll get to that in a minute.
Let's make it this simple, shall we? There
Please.
are 2 categories of sugars or sweeteners. One is fermentable, the other is non-fermentable.
Yes.
If you add a non-fermentable sugar to your beverage,
Sweetener.
then you don't have to worry about anything.
Non-fermentables are lactose, allulose, monk fruit, things like that. Stevia is another one. Though stevia, that's a weird chemically bitter flavor to brews. Just be careful with that.
And lots of the non-fermentables,
they all have their own,
on your personal preference, could have an off flavor to you. So you want to try those out and make sure that they work for you.
We get asked all the time why we don't just use those instead of pasteurizing. And A, it's because I don't really like the flavor of a lot of them. They don't taste as good as the real thing. And B, they are known, even though they supposedly don't affect blood sugars, they do in a different way. It's a long story and I'm not even gonna get into it, but I am diabetic. Many of you probably know that already. And it does affect me, not when I have it, but down the road for a longer period of time, anywhere from 12 to 48, even 72 hours sometimes. So we tend to avoid them because we've just had bad results with them. So that's why we don't do them. Will we do them from time to time? Sure, just to show people, but in general, we tend to avoid that kind of thing.
Before we realized this, we actually got a good amount of monk fruit, and I actually preferred that to normal sugar. It didn't bother me at all. I liked the flavor.
Yeah.
So I consumed all the monk fruit so that way Brian wouldn't have to, because it doesn't affect my blood glucose because I don't have that issue.
Right. It doesn't affect everyone equally or the same way. So I just happen to be one of those people that's more sensitive to it. But All those things are totally available to you if you don't have a problem with them and in the right dosage. All of them can be dangerous in too high of a dosage, which would be really difficult to do in homebrew, just so you're aware. So, you know, it's not really so much something to worry about. I just wanted to mention that because, you know, you always have to have your little disclaimer warning thing. However,
back to the notes.
Yes. If you don't want to worry about re-fermentation, that is one method. Use a non-fermentable sugar. The other method is the single dose method. Some people might call this cheating. I don't. I just see it as kind of like you don't keep your coffee pre-made with sugar or tea pre-made with sugar. You add it as you make the coffee or tea, right?
So why do you need to do that with your brew?
Let's say you have 2 people in the house or 3 people in the house. One of them likes things super dry, one of them likes things super sweet, and the other one likes things just a little sweet. You can either make 3 different bottles, or you can make one dry brew, and then the person that likes dry just pours a glass. The person that likes it super sweet adds a little bit of the sweetener of their choice to it, and the third person adds just a little bit of the sweetener of their choice.
We like to call this the Goldilocks method.
That way you can have it however you want, and there is no worry of re-fermentation. Unless you let that sit in the glass for weeks, which, if you do that, you probably shouldn't have poured that much of a glass in the first place. I can't conceive of a situation where I would pour a glass of something that would last me weeks.
Unless you're my
dad. It's a big glass. Yeah, we're not getting into that. That's just weird. Whole other story. But that's the idea. You pour a glass of mead, wine, cider, whatever it is, and you add sweetener to it, just like you would anything else. They make a joke of it in movies, guys that add sugar to wine, but realistically, what's the difference in adding sugar to that wine or leaving sugars in it after you fermented it and bottled it? It's the same thing. So, you know, all these people that get all hoity about it, it's really the same thing. Sorry. But none of you are those people, so yeah, it's not really a problem. Anyway, if you do decide that you want to add a sweetener like sugar, honey, something that'll re-ferment to a brew, there's several ways to do it. You can add a juice concentrate, which has a couple other caveats to it. First, it can cause re-fermentation on its own just by adding sugars. Second, it may dilute something that might have been at a point where it wouldn't re-ferment, where it might now. So there's that. It also lowers your ABV, which is the reason why it could re-ferment. Let me explain about that.
Math.
No, it's not really math. It's a really simple concept, and that is that yeast have an alcohol tolerance, okay? And that can range from anywhere from, I've heard, as low as 7 or 8%, all the way into 15, 17, 18, and some yeasts claim 20 and higher. In general, though, wine yeast and mead yeast and things that we use go anywhere from 8 to 18%, roughly. So that means if you made a brew and you had it already go to 12% and it tastes sweet, and you've tested it and you know it's done, that means you can pretty much add sweetener with impunity. It's probably not going to ferment because there's already sugars there and they didn't ferment those because you're past the tolerance of your yeast. So you're safe. However, if you know you have a 12% tolerance and you're at 10% and it's dry, well, there's a pretty good chance that it's going to re-ferment, okay? And cold crashing, not a way to stop fermentation. It temporarily helps. That's as far as we will go.
The temperature difference in a brew either lowers the rate of fermentation or increases the rate of fermentation.
To a point, yeah.
It doesn't actually stop it either way, unless you go to extreme high temperatures, then it will kill the yeast.
Yeah, above 120 degrees Fahrenheit should start killing yeast off. Below 30 to 35 degrees Fahrenheit, they start to really not work much at all. But as soon as that comes back up to room temperature, let's say, you know, in the 50 to 80 degree range, it's going to start, it could very well start fermenting again. So that's something to be aware of. That's why we like the ferment dry and back sweeten and pasteurize, which I'll get into pasteurization in just a second. It's a very critical thing, versus trying to surpass that alcohol tolerance. Years ago, and we still have lots of videos out there, there's still good recipes, there's nothing wrong with them. They used to surpass the tolerance of the yeast, and we found that it was harder to reproduce that same effect. Other people said the same thing, because temperature fluctuation can alter it a lot. The fruit that you use, the honey you used has a greater effect. So now we go with the ferment it dry. Now we know it's 10%. That yeast was 15%. No problem. Back sweeten and pasteurize. Now, why do we pasteurize? Because if we don't, we're no longer back sweetening, we are step feeding. Let me explain what I mean by that. Back sweetening is literally just to add sweetness. But if it can re-ferment, now it's actually adding to the ABV, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just not really back sweetening, and it could be what you're looking for, but that's beyond the scope of this video. But it also produces gas and pressure from that gas. So if you're going to back sweeten something that went dry, here's what you do. Keep it in the fermenter, put in your sweetener, put an airlock on it. That way you are safe, because if you cap that off or you bottle that, it could explode, okay? And depending on how much sweetening you added, it's very likely to explode. And that's the thing, I want to get the safety aspect of that across. I can't understate it enough. The explosion that these create sends shards of glass at upwards of 50 miles an hour. That's enough to cut through flesh and hurt you really, really bad.
All you have to do is go through our comments and you will see multiple people explaining that yes, it hurts, don't do that.
Yep.
Okay, so we try to stress safety in all our videos. Sometimes we're effective on that, sometimes we're not, and we appreciate that, and we accept your comments, and we try to address those. So safety first, all the time, people, okay? So exploding glass is bad, okay?
Now, there's a lot of ways to stop that re-fermentation process. Our preferred method is pasteurization. There are other methods. You can use various chemical methods to do it. I just don't prefer to do it that way, but if you choose to, please follow the manufacturer's suggested directions or a known source of information on how to do that. We don't instruct on it because it's just not something we do. We do pasteurize, and we've had very good luck with pasteurization, never had any off flavors, and we've never actually broken a bottle or had any issues at all.
Knock on the wood.
If you do it safely, not a problem. We have videos on that. Derek will put links below.
Yes.
Let's see, what did we not cover? Because we went totally out of order here.
We did, as is the way.
Yeah. When should you back sweeten? This one comes up a lot. If you sweeten in the beginning of a fermentation process, you're not really back sweetening, you're actually adding to the primary fermentation. Not to get too into the names of whatever things are, because that's not important. It's more the step in the process where you are that's critical. You don't want to add sweetener while it's fermenting because you don't really know what it's going to end up with, and you could cause a stall. So
why
you want
is
to be careful.
Because yeasts can't read.
And you don't want to overstress your yeast. You don't want to have too much sugars in there where they might say, nope, I'm done, and now you just messed up the whole thing. Instead, let the recipe finish. Once it's done and you've checked it and you are certain that fermentation is complete, normally it's going to go dry if you follow most of our recipes of late, then you can say, all right, let me taste this. Even better, let it sit for a month or two before you bottle that. That way it's had a little bit of age, because when things are young, sweetness makes them taste much better, but they don't always need it.
And there's a reason why we say that, and that's because if you've noticed and you followed along with our tastings, the younger tastings tend to have those sharper, discordant notes. Where we let it age, then everything kind of blends and melds together.
Right.
And so where we might be like, oh my goodness, this needs some sweetness at the beginning because of all those notes. If we let it age, then we're like,
that could be too much.
oh, it's kind of nice now. I don't really need that additional
sweetness. So if
sweetness.
you sweetened it, it might be too much later on. So there's a balancing act there, and it's a judgment call, you know? Let it sit for a month or two. That gives you a good idea of what the potential of it is to know, do you need to sweeten it or not? And a lot of the time we're finding we really don't need to sweeten stuff as much as we thought we did.
Yes.
Because here's the thing. Sweetness covers up mistakes really, really well.
Yes.
So you can totally screw up a mead and have off flavors and weird stuff going on. Add some sweetness. Pretty much anybody's going to appreciate it. And there's nothing wrong with that if that is what you're doing.
We've said this time and time again, and that is flavor is king. So keeping along that mindset, as long as you enjoy that flavor, it doesn't matter if it's dry, it doesn't matter if it's sweet, it matters if you are enjoying that flavor.
Right.
And you really will only know if you are completely enjoying the flavor of that particular combination after it's had time to age a bit and meld and get those harsh edges kind of dissipate and gone away.
So summary, when should you backsweeten? When it's done. That simple. How much should you backsweeten? This is probably the most common question we get. How much sugar should I add to make this sweet? Well, sweet to me is different than sweet to you. So what I think is sweet might be a completely different amount. I have seen people that said 0.990 on a wine was too sweet for them.
And we were like, what?
That blows my mind. I think they might have been reading their hydrometer wrong, but they sounded like an experienced brewer, so I wasn't going to argue with them. Everybody's tastes are different. When we first started making wines, and even when I first started drinking wines, I could not drink anything dry, remotely dry.
And now we're starting to appreciate the dry beverages a lot more.
Right, so tastes can change, and they're very, very different. We have a couple of VIPs that love 1040 and 1.040 and up for sweetness levels in their meads and wines. And I can't say they're wrong. If that's what you like and that's what you enjoy, then that's what you should do. So for us to say, well, you should add this much, that might not be sweet enough for you. It might be 10 times too sweet for you. We can't possibly know.
To complicate matters even more, if you're making a capsicum that has that fiery bite to it, you might want it to be more sweet so that you have a balance of those flavors.
Yeah, every flavor is different
If you're making
too.
a sweet wine, you want it to be less sweet because there's nothing competing with the sweetness in that. So it's all really relative to your personal palate.
Now, we did a video on surpassing alcohol tolerance versus backsweetening, and I talked a little bit about where if you watch us backsweeten, we don't actually give a volume. I just pour it in and we taste it, and then I pour some more in and we taste it. I give a reading at the end, and we didn't a couple times, but for the most part, we try to give a reading at the end. That way, instead of me saying, add 1.2 pounds of honey to this, I say, ours ended at a 1.012 gravity. If you shoot for that, no matter what your volume size now, you're gonna have something that's relatively the same as what we had, just for a frame of reference.
And if you follow along with our recipes, and you know I like my beverages slightly more sweet than what Brian and Derek likes, or I like my beverages slightly less sweet than Brian and Derek.
You can adjust.
Then you can adjust.
Yep. Like if you know that we did 1.012 and we found it perfect, and you know you don't like things as sweet as we do, you can go to like 1.006 or 1.004, or vice versa. You like it sweeter, go to like 1.020 or a little bit higher. Everybody has their own, and there's no one size fits all for brews either. Like on that brew, as she was saying with the capsicum as an example, 1.012 on a capsicum for me is probably going to be too dry. But on a melomel, I'm going to love it. So there's no one size fits all. Every brew is a little bit different, and they all require their own flavoring.
Sure,
That's
and
why
we know
flavor to taste.
We know plenty of people who aren't as sensitive to the capsaicin and capsicum.
Capsaicin.
Capsicums. I can't say the word.
Capsicums.
That. And so in that instance, they won't need it to be as sweet because they're not as sensitive to the capsaicin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like when we first met, you actually could do more hot heat things than I could, and now it's the other way around. Yeah. She's much more sensitive to the hot things.
And it's interesting because I am only more sensitive now to the capsaicin heat, where ginger heat I can eat till affinity, and it bothers him. So, and another thing this is science. Here's your science moment from City Steading. Your palate changes roughly every
7 years.
Somebody said it was like a couple of months.
Yeah, it might even be that.
So
things that you didn't like, you can adjust to, and things that you like, you might not.
So try again.
Because years ago, believe it or not, I didn't like whiskey. Shocking, I know.
Who are you, and what are you saying?
Right? But it happened. But yeah, I mean, that's the gist on backsweetening. I'm sure we didn't cover every single aspect of it, but it is very, very simple at its core. Try not to overcomplicate it. Try to be safe if you do it, and cover yourself. If either put it in the glass, that's the safest way. You're never gonna have a problem. It's when you bottle, that's where there's an issue. Put it in the fermenter, put an airlock on it, let it sit for a while. If nothing happens, you're safe. Okay? Really, really simple stuff. As always, we try to get to your comments and questions. If you have questions about back sweetening, please
leave it in the comments below on this YouTube channel.
Absolutely, because that way we can see it and help. By the way, too, as far as comments go, you can leave a comment on almost any video and we do see it. It helps if you leave a comment on the video that it pertains to, because if
that way other viewers will know that it pertains to this video and they can learn along with you.
If you are asking a question that does not pertain to the video that you're leaving on, please tell us as much information about the question as possible so that we can help you without having to go, wait a minute, this is on back sweetening and they're talking about something completely different. It happens once in a while and we understand, but just know that what we see for comments is different than how you see comments. We don't have to go to every video and see the comments. You can just leave a comment once on any video and we do see it, because there's a couple people that seem to think like they need to leave that comment over 10 different videos for us to see it, and that's just not true. We
Don't do that, you'll get the same answer each time.
Yeah, or just one answer and
or just a little heart.
9 repeats of, yeah, we answered that already. But anyway, that's the gist of back sweetening. Make it sweet. Make it to your taste, and if you like it and everybody that you give it to likes it, you're doing it right. There's no such thing as too sweet or too dry, as long as you like what you're drinking. So, as always, guys, thanks so much for watching and have a great day.
Bye-bye.